If you foam roll and then only feel better for an hour and then the tension comes back, that's probably because it's not your muscle, it's your fascia that you need to be targeting. Let me explain. Okay, so fascia has hyaluronic acid in it, and that is essentially the lube of fascia. So first of all, fascia is connective tissue that connects everything in your body, okay? And I'm gonna explain, I'm gonna give like a little bit of a metaphor so that you can really see this with your eyes, because fascia is so important, okay? So the reason why fascia needs lube to begin with, or hyaluronic acid, aka lube, is because fascia doesn't stretch. Fascia it's in layers, and those layers glide on top of each other, and that's how it moves. So it's super important for it to be hydrated with that hyaluronic acid, okay? And basically, that hyaluronic acid exists in what's called the ground substance of fascia, which is the fluid or gel extracellular matrix. So like there's cells in the fascia, and then outside of the cells, there's this like gel fluid stuff. And a lot of that is hyaluronic acid, okay? So hyaluronic acid is produced by cells called fasciocytes. And those fasciocytes live in the loose connective tissue layer between fascial layers. Okay, so imagine that fascia is an orange, right? Just like stay with me here, okay? Because I feel like this is gonna help. This helps me. Okay, so fascia is an orange. The peel of the orange is this superficial fascial layer underneath your skin, okay? Now, you know how oranges like have each wrapped segment, like with a little bit of wrapping paper, like the clear thing? That's your deep fascia that wraps your muscles and your organs. Okay, so like when we talk about like visceral fascia, that's the fascia around your organs. That's your deep fascia or your visceral fascia, okay? So like your each wrapped segment of your orange. Then we have white pithy stuff between segments. This is important, between segments. Not like the white pithy stuff that's all over the orange, like over the top, that connects it to the peel, but the white pithy stuff between the segments is the loose connective tissue between layers. That's where your fasciocytes live, that's where your hyaluronic acid is, and that's the layer that allows the two layers on top and bottom, the deep fascial wrapping, like the muscles, to glide across each other, right? Okay, and then the white pithy stuff all over that connects the entire orange to the peel is the layer of fascia that suspends and anchors all of our organs to our body wall and to each other. So that's what a lot of people think of when they think of fascia, is like this white stuff that's like all connecting your organs to your abdominal wall and like each other and stuff, and that's super important, but that's one specific layer of fascia. Then there's your tendons, which is basically like, imagine the piece at the top of the orange that like thickens, like each orange segment we're talking about, and the casing around that segment, there's like the piece at the top and the bottom that like thickens to attach it to the rest of the orange. That's your tendon. So your tendon is essentially like, if your muscle is encapsulated in fascia, your tendons are either ends that are attaching the muscle to your bone, okay? Now, I hope that we have a little bit of a better understanding of like kind of how fascia looks like in the body and what it does. So we're talking about this loose connective tissue layer, right? The white pithy in between the orange segments. That's where fasciocytes live. That's the place that needs to be hydrated with hyaluronic acid. And fasciocytes produce hyaluronic acid. So injury, overuse, chronic tension, immobility, like not moving enough. Any of these things cause the hyaluronic acid in these layers to become thick and dense. Let me say that again. Injury, overuse, muscular overuse, chronic tension, immobility cause the hyaluronic acid, the lube, in between the layers of fascia that are supposed to help it glide, to become dense, like honey. Sticky, dense, not fluid. And it obviously decreases the slide and glide of the fascial layers. So this obviously is going to impair your mobility, but it does so much more than that. So basically, you have nerve endings and pain receptors called nociceptors in this ground substance, in this gel, in this fluid where your hyaluronic acid is, okay? the more dense the fluid is, the more pressure on these pain receptors and nerve endings. Okay, stick with me here. So, injury, overuse, chronic tension, immobility. The hyaluronic acid and the ground substance between the fascial layers in the loose connective tissue, in the white pithy area, gets thick. It gets dense. That density puts pressure on your pain receptors and on your nerve endings that are present in that layer. What does that do? That means that you have a lower activation threshold for those receptors and those nerve endings. What is activation threshold? The activation threshold is the amount of signaling that your nerve needs to finally send a signal out to your central nervous system, okay? So if we're talking about the peripheral nervous system, it's like how much input do I have to give to finally get this nerve to send a signal? That's your threshold potential. Usually it's quite high in pain receptors, but this pressure lowers it, which basically means that it makes your pain receptors and your nerve endings hypersensitive, that pressure from the dense hyaluronic acid, okay? So that means that it's gonna start signaling to your brain and your spinal cord, to your central nervous system, that there is a threat because there is pain for literally no reason, because there is no pain, there is no threat. Your hyaluronic acid is just dense AF, okay? There's no tissue damage. But because of the fact that it's signaling tissue damage, then what's your nervous system going to do? Your nervous system is going to chronically brace the muscles around that fascia. Any kind of muscle that your nervous system can control that is around the fascia is going to be braced. Chronic bracing is an overuse pattern, right? Because it's chronic. You're always bracing those muscles. It's overuse. What did we say about overuse? With overuse, the hyaluronic acid becomes thick and dense, and it, again, perpetuates this entire cycle. So whether you start with injury, overuse, chronic tension, or immobility, or whether you end with chronic bracing, it still is going to perpetuate this entire cycle, because then your hyaluronic acid is going to get more dense and you're going to be having more pressure on those pain receptors. It's going to signal your central nervous system that you're under threat, and chronic bracing, overuse, there we go. Okay, what can we do about it? I don't have time to explain in this video, so I'm going to have to make a second video, but there is a very clear technique for fascial release that we can use to stimulate hyaluronic acid generation in these cells, in these fasciocytes. This is so cool! Okay, I hope this was as interesting to you as it was to me. I'm gonna make the next video ASAP. Sending so much love.